But I gotta believe that the community that I know that loves you, and I know a lot of people that do, it's because you show up. It's because you're honest. It's because you own your shit. It's because you write really open, vulnerable, biting posts to yourself. And you know, and in some cases that may be a little bit too much truth for somebody to handle, in which case then they're going to reshuffle.
It's a filtering system.
They're placed in your orbit. And, you know, and then it just works.
There are people on LinkedIn who build a personal brand by yelling. And then there's Robert Haines, a life coach, a thought architect, and the founder of Engineering Your Life. Robert doesn't shout to be heard. He whispers what most of us are afraid to say. And somehow, we all lean in a little bit closer. He's not here to promise you a funnel or a 6-figure glow up. He's here to ask the questions that rearrange your insides. In this episode, we're talking about reinvention, real community, the fear of being seen, and what it means to coach with your heart instead of a fucking sales script. Let's welcome to the spiral calmly, respectfully, and with at least one notebook out so you can take some notes. Robert Haines. Robert, welcome to Things My Friends Say I Shouldn't Be Doing.
Oh, Danny, I am touched and delighted to be here and humbled by that intro. I feel seen. Yeah, I got kind of like, not on video, thankfully, so I can wipe the tears from my eyes. But yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. The intake form is doing its job, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's like...
Which does lead me to the first question. You know, your one of your responses was kind of just like a full body experience for me. You said, after every post, I want to die. And then I don't. Then I forget and I post again. So like, let's start there. What is it like showing up seemingly for the first time, not as a title or a job, but just as a human?
Oh, it's frightening and thrilling. And I think those words probably did capture it, is that almost every time I post, especially if I'm really putting myself out there, and I don't mean by like revealing details of my life. I'm actually pretty comfortable with that. But by putting myself out there in a way where I don't know what the reaction is going to be, I don't know if I've been too much or too performative or too fill in the blank, right?
Right.
And when I get concerned about that, it tears me up. And because I'm being vulnerable, because I'm posting, you know, more, I went through a period where a month or two where I didn't post much. And because I'm really being real, I don't write drafts. That came up recently. I write on the platform and then hit post. Sometimes I don't want to see what I've written.
I think you might be braver than I am.
Yeah, well, brave might be one word for it. Reckless might be another word. You know, unhinged, avoidant. But my concern is I spent most of my life managing how I looked and caring way too much what other people thought of me. And I haven't completely released that fear. And one of my greater fears is that if people think that I'm like trying to take the limelight or showboat or be the guy. And if I think people think that about me, I start to like get stomach cramps. And then I have on occasion deleted posts that I have written that felt that way to me. I will say that most of the time when I've checked with other people about that, they're like, it's no problem. But meanwhile, internally, I'm like torturing myself. I'm like, who the hell do you think you are? What the heck are you doing? and then I just go through this like misery, and it's not all the time, but it's probably 2/3 of the time. And then I get through that process without doing anything self-destructive, which may be a whole other topic for us to talk about. And then I do it again.
And then I do it again. Yeah. I mean, I really do. I'm going to say the word that nobody likes to hear. I really do resonate with what you're saying there. Like, the weight of being perceived is super heavy in a lot of industries, right? But like, specifically when you are working, living, branding yourself online, I think the weight of being perceived is even harder. You know, I don't know what your particular follower count is looking like now, but let's say, hypothetically speaking, you're sitting at 1,500 people that some of them you know, some of them you know a little bit, some of them you don't know at all. It's hard to keep track once the numbers start to get larger. And the weight of being perceived is sending something out to 1,500 people, or, you know, when you get even higher up there, 20,000. And every thought crosses your neurodivergent brain of, are they going to like me? Is this going to be too much? Is this going to be the post that gets me flamed and posted on LinkedIn Lunatics? Is this the post that could end my career? And it could be something super simple. Like,
I think we all have our version of that. What's interesting to me is that larger groups of people don't freak me out so much. I've got about 1,100 followers, which is somewhat miraculous considering a year ago I had 400, and I haven't gone off farming for follows. I just like connect to people that I like, and people sometimes read what I like and follow that.
You mean you didn't buy followers? Like,
yeah.
No EO operation for you?
Well, I you know, like I know of people that very intentionally will go out at, you know, on a connecting mission. And the idea of having as many as possible doesn't appeal to me. The idea of, especially these days in my life, because things have changed in the last 5 years, my real focus these days is I want people that actually want to connect with me, that actually resonate with my message. I don't care, honestly, what the numbers are. I mean, at least, you know, not when I think about it. My concern is more about like one person being hurt. And man, if you're trying to look out for not having one person be hurt, especially given that if they're hurt, it's about them, not about me.
Right.
That can just drive you crazy. And oh yeah, welcome to my little world. You know, if I have one person that feels like I was trying to throw shade on them, or, you know, or do something that makes me look better, that I'm really sensitive to that thought, in part because there was a time in my life where, not trying to harm people, I really was the guy trying to get the attention. I was an attention addict. One of my list of things that I used to medicate was just getting validation and attention from other people. And I didn't ever I never thought of myself as a narcissist. But I was definitely somebody who had such a sense of insecurity, such a low sense of self-esteem, that if I didn't have somebody telling me I was all right, didn't tell me that I was doing things good, that didn't tell me that, wow, that was really kind, that I would forget 5 minutes later, and I would be mugging for that again. It may be a real miserable person to be in relationship with, I'll tell you.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I can get that. I've gone through times in my life where I've questioned if I take up too much space, because I am just naturally a conversationalist, who doesn't like attention, you know? Validation and attention is a hell of a drug. So I commend you for breaking that cycle, even though it's, of course, like any type of addiction, is something that requires daily management. But what are you hoping people will see from you today?
Quite frankly, what I'm hoping is that people see themselves. I'm in this wonderful space with the work that I've been doing where largely it's not about me. When I'm at my best, I'm helping people to see themselves and feel and live their lives better. So if hopefully what I share, and I share a lot of really personal things. I share about my life. I share about my dog. I share about anxiety. But it's not so that you can like learn my story. It's because me sharing that openly gives people a chance to like feel, hey, maybe some of that's going on for me too.
Yeah.
And I use, I have some intention behind my format. I tend to share challenges that I've faced and transcended. In recovery, we call that experience, strength, and hope. And so if you go look at my posts, probably 80% of them are, here's some challenge that I faced. Here's what I did. And here's what I've come to conclude about life now. Here's the growth. Here's the aha. Here's the, and I hope that, someone reading that, and it often happens, somebody will read it and say, wow, I needed that today. I'm going through this myself. What you said resonates. And so I do use that word, and I use it in an engineering term. So, and I appreciate you sharing that so openly and vulnerably. And then they're kind of safe to feel it themselves. And if they feel so safe that they then will comment about their lives, I feel a sense of relief. I feel a sense of peace, and I feel joy because, I lived so much of my life under this crushing burden of self-doubt and insecurity and inferiority and fear of anyone. And I could make anybody look like a bully in my eyes. Having that weight lifted, even for a moment, lets you breathe again. And if I can have somebody go through something that I've read and feel like they can breathe, then I've done my job.
Yeah, I mean, having somebody say that they really connected with something that you write is, I think, the highest form of feedback and flattery. You've done that to me a couple of times. I can recall one time you, and I believe it was Orena, both being like, this newer content is very jarring. And that was because I'm very, I don't want to say the word manipulative because I think it's the wrong word for it, but I'm blanking on words here. I'm very mastermind and intricate in the way that I plan things. And so that more jarring social psychology driven content was a lead up to this podcast.
Well, I would use the word intentional, and
yeah, I guess intentional is a better word.
Well, it's just a word I would use, but I mean, it hit me. It was like being hit in the face. And well, there were times where what you were writing, I thought you were writing to affect someone.
Me.
Well,
me.
I understand. You explained that. That made more sense to me.
The content was writing it in like this mirror sense where, because I'm nerdy. I love to deep dive into things. I mean, I read books like People Powered, so psychology has always been something that like interests me. And so I will read about things incessantly to kind of understand them better. And that's where I deep dived into the social psychology of like, why do we do what we do? Why does somebody else's perception of me hurt me so badly?
Yeah,
because that is a human experience. We might be at different levels of confidence, but everybody has insecurities. Everybody has something that they don't like about themselves. Everybody is conditioned and or trained in a way where, your coping mechanisms aren't your coping mechanisms. Your The way that you present yourself is not actually your personality. It is a amalgamation of all of the different ways that you tweaked yourself to be more digestible for somebody else.
The word.
Yeah,
and you've done that masterfully, and in a way, like I said, I a couple of times I felt bruised, not and there was a couple of times where I got defensive. I'm sure there, if you go back and look at some of the comments I've met, some of them might have been like explaining myself in response to the post, but you've done a really good job of digging into the dark recesses of being human. And when I read your very intentional process for doing that, I was really, really impressed.
Yeah.
A lot of what I've had years and years of deep self-exploration, and I write from that collective experience. You were being very intentional about specific human experiences, and I'll just say that you nailed it. There isn't one of those posts that you've written that didn't hit hard and deep. And I needed to breathe for a bit after reading it. So it was actually helpful for me to know you were writing it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't write things that brutally honest and harsh to other people. Does that make sense? I'm afraid I'm going to hurt their feelings. So the only way that I can actually get something like that out is if I make myself the target.
Well,
that leads me to a really good follow-up question, because we did ask, what you hoped people would see today, but now I really want to know, what are you afraid that they might misunderstand
today?
The Robert today.
Well, I'm constantly afraid that people will think that either that I think that I'm better, or that I'm, attention grabbing, including pity. In fact, it really bothers me when I read posts, because there are people that are riding the pity party train, and they're just posting sob stories to get
it everywhere.
Yeah, I don't actually see it a lot. I often will see past it to the actual wounded human. I really try to see people as people, but I get worried sometimes when people might think that I'm doing that I'm writing what I'm writing or saying what I'm saying to try and get a specific attention. That I'm in conflict, though. Let's be honest. I'm also a human. So validation, you mentioned it being a really powerful drug. So there is a part of my personality that wants to be validated, recognized, seen, and or have people have compassion. And that's sometimes at war with the part of me that doesn't want to be noticed as someone seeking that. And that puts me sometimes in a nasty little spiral. So, I would like to be seen the way that I want to show up in the world, as somebody who's lived through a life that was challenging and has learned something from it and has found a genuine concern for uplifting people and himself from that. I have to add the and himself part, because for a while it becomes let me sacrifice myself for the world. And I was raised by a martyr. Wow. My mom was a really good martyr, to the point where I really thought that was the most noble way to be. And so I've been spending a lot of time unlearning that way of being, to just be me. And the more that I can realize that at my very best, I'm just a vehicle through which, divine wisdom, the universe, use your own word here, speaks, then I can feel a lot more calm about how life shows up. The best of the stuff that I do is just me letting the, collective unconscious come through me and speak to other people in ways they resonate with. And if I cannot get in the way of that message, I've done my job well. But so yeah, probably the worst thing that I can be accused of may not be actually a lie. is to be, scamming for attention. If
Yeah.
somebody thinks that I'm trying to like take the limelight and make it the Robert show, then I cringe.
It's
a lot.
kind of interesting. So the first part of the answer that you provided was that you don't want people to misunderstand and think that you think that you're better than them, which is a good segue, I guess I could say, to a story time, if you will.
Okay.
Another reason that the podcast has started, and leads into the next question that I've got for you as well. So I, have gotten a lot of DMs about my placement within Weird LinkedIn, how I feel about it, what's gone on. Obviously, there have been times where recently I have shut certain doors with certain people for very great reasons. But one of the things that popped up that caused me to no longer care if I am misunderstood, I finally did receive that type of feedback in a post, won't name names. I was tagged in said post. And later on in that post, towards the bottom, if you read it, says one of the OGs has left the conversation because they feel they've outgrown it. Personally, I think they think they're better than us.
I remember that post.
I don't. However,
I remember what you are quoting.
However, the feedback did sting, and I guess you could say it's part of what I consider my villain origin story. Because at this point, my relationship with visibility has changed, and I no longer am wanting to care about the weight of being perceived. I know that I have a life offline, and I know that in my heart of hearts, I care about people, and I actually don't think that I'm better than anybody else, because there are many times in the darkest corners of my mind where I question if I'm ever good enough for anything that I've ever received.
I hear you.
So it did sting, but it was then the social psychology posts that I started. That was just ripping off the Band-Aid. I went quiet for a little bit. I needed to fall back and think to myself, is this worth it? Because to see such a bubbly, upbeat person usually make such a comment about me, it was jarring. It hurt. The apology did come in my DMs in the form of what looks like a PR move of let me see if I can fix what I broke, but it came 3 weeks late, in my opinion. You can't, if you're apologizing three weeks later, it's not because you're sorry. It's because you realize that there's some fallout to being so openly rude to somebody that is just as well known on a platform, especially somebody that speaks from a place of never building their platform on hate. And so I don't wish any of those people ill will. I still hope that they eat. I just don't wish them to eat at the algorithm of my table. And so that leads me into my next question, which was, how has your relationship with visibility changed?
Well, first of all, that whole experience was a emotional roller coaster for me to witness.
It was to me, it was like the equivalent of feeling like a fall from grace, if you will.
And I'm a middle child.
Me too.
And a Libra Virgo cusp, and I have been mediating and moderating and explaining people to each other my entire life, and it took effort for me to just stay out of that conversation. One of the things that I've come to realize in my life, I have people in my life that view people as good or bad, that really black and white separate humanity.
I think we're all capable of a little bit of a gray area, and if you don't,
I think my opinion after a lifetime of villainizing my dad, my stepfather, and other people that have harmed me in my life, is I've come to a much different impression of humans. I think all humans have good, kind, loving parts of them, and all humans also have, they're also still people. And I think people are flawed, and people have wounds, and people have assumptions. And the challenge is that when those assumptions come and do something harmful, intentionally or not, one of the challenges is to see there's a human being doing that, a hurt human being doing that. And so part of my experience, and I'm not going to dive into the details or my personal explanations of it, but I wanted to at least mention it. I was observing all of that happening. I read, I believe, most of the posts around it, including yours. They brought my attention to others, and it just hurt. It really hurt me to witness that, because I don't know hardly anyone that would intentionally harm somebody. I did get to witness people who felt hurt reacting, and that in some ways would cause other hurt. It becomes a spiral, or an infinite loop. Meanwhile, I lost track of your question.
No, it's fine. I do want to follow up though on that segment and that piece of information. My post that called attention to the post where I was called out, the reason being was because there were so many people that liked it, because you know how LinkedIn doesn't show you everything in the post. You've got to click more, right?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people tagged in it, because that seems to be the way that these things kind of spiral, right? So, but it's a t-shirt, I believe it was, with like a cute, funny little phrase.
Yeah.
And I commented on it because my philosophy is, if you're going to publicly name and shame people, or if you're going to publicly be hateful in somebody's comment section, I'm going to publicly bring attention to it, because you played the game of being public. Yeah. And so I publicly commented on that post and shamed that person for speaking about belonging, but in the same breath, tearing people down. And there were so many people who had liked it, that I was connected to, that I said, I'm sure the people that liked this didn't even read the post, which leads me to another insight. How many times do we just doom scroll and we like something without reading the full context?
Yeah.
And then we're guilty by association. It reminds me of a time that I didn't, not read it and like it. But LinkedIn on mobile sucks. LinkedIn, fix your fucking app. Yep. And I laugh reacted at somebody's meme post, but LinkedIn laugh reacted at the post above it or below it. I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah, I've been reading about that.
And it was this poor girl that I'm connected with, and I don't remember names, talking about infertility issues, or a very sensitive topic. And thank goodness she tagged me in the comments and was like, I really hope you're not laughing at me. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. No, LinkedIn mobile's and I read her whole post, and I reached out to her in DM, if I remember correctly, and apologized greatly, because oh my God, I was terrified. But the question that I had for you was, how has your relationship with online visibility changed since you started becoming more active?
It's, well, it just amplifies what's already there. It's made me more aware of my own feelings and fears, but also sort of like exposure therapy. I probably have, in excess of 100 posts, that, I have a lot of posts now, and I have a whole lot more comments. My comment game is way up. And
mine isn't. Mine's been slowing down. I've been having this, not post and ghost, but just being even more intentional and commenting less. Yeah. Because, again, wounds sting.
They do.
And so it's, again, how my visibility has changed and things of that nature. I look at things a little bit differently. I
Yeah.
want to be everybody's friend, obviously, because of what I do for community and because I speak about belonging so deeply. But at the same time, I have learned the hard way. I guess the last one was once too many times, that you cannot always see the good in everybody and just lean into that, because unfortunately people are people. Like you said, we are intrinsically flawed,
Yeah.
and we at times open mouth insert foot.
That
It's
happens.
wild. It's wild. We can be experts in our fields, but I feel like sometimes that little post button turns us into middle schoolers, hoping that somebody's going to sit next to us at lunch and be our friend.
Well, and I would love to say that doesn't happen to me, but it does.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's a lot of parts to answer the question you asked. So I appreciate when people align and tell me things that work for them and that they like, which my experience, that's been the dominant part. I don't tend to post a lot of controversy. I I have like 1,100 followers now. I'm not some army, and I never really aspire to be, but it's, I don't get a lot of controversy in there, but people are going to do stuff. People are going to like misinterpret. People are not going to give people the benefit of the doubt. They're going to draw their own conclusions because we survived that way. That's part of how the human brain works. And we're pretty much always wrong. Whenever we think we know what somebody's doing or why, we're wrong.
We're usually wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. We're almost never right, because you can't know. You can never know what somebody's doing and why. And meanwhile, a lot of us have wounds from the past. In fact, I think one of the things that is common amongst a lot of us that have found community in the weird LinkedIn space is that we've been places where we didn't belong or didn't feel like we belong. And so there's sort of like a, if you like me, if you even look like you like me, feels comfortable. I want to like wrap myself around you guys. And a lot of people, and I was one of them, react to this like enveloping cheerleading community like, holy crap. And then it gets really spiky. You get really like a huge adrenaline rush.
Dopamine hit right at the beginning, and the crash
and it's very easy to get carried away with that and be like, oh, you guys are the best thing ever. And I do really, really enjoy it, but I'm a recovering love addict.
You have to put it in healthy boundaries.
I've had to learn how to manage this with all of humans. This just happens to be an example.
Right.
And it happens to be social media, which is also its own addictive medium on its own. So I'm having to do my own meditation practice, literally, to find my center here. And yeah, I ride the waves. There's times where I'm like, woo, and then I get really carried away and post something somewhat impulsively, and then I go through that whole fear crash thing. I don't think this is ever really going to end for me, but I am doing a better job of right sizing it, and I'm also doing a better job of having grace for people without just shutting down my boundaries. There's a balance to be had, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a challenging one, and I've been watching you navigate that. And I used to judge people and usually like put them on a pedestal or fear them instantly. I would have a very quick first impression, and then I would forever justify that impression and say, and I thought I was a really good judge of character. Now I am watching more people over time, and finding out, not because I don't think people are inherently any one bucket, good, bad, nice, nasty.
No.
I think humans are this messy finger painting,
complex and complicated, and everything's messy. I mean,
and so I try to understand if somebody's having a bad day, or they're coming across as pissy or judgy or whatever. I try to breathe through that and allow that maybe that was a time of bad judgment,
Yeah.
while still being watchful, because some people can have lots of those periods and you can be in the line of fire when that happens. And I don't know how I would react if I had posts like that written about me. I have a hard enough time dealing with my own judgment of me, much less someone else's judgment of me. I do have a tendency to explain myself when I feel like somebody's upset, more than I need to.
A habit I have desperately tried to break over time. And I think that is, again, the intentional responses of social psychology posts and the podcast and all of that is kind of my response of not over explaining myself while still having an avenue to explain it without being so openly messy about it. Because, you know, it's so funny because I think it was me and Brianna, we were like, I don't name names, but I've got receipts. And that's where I sit at, is I don't want to name names. Like, I don't want to sit here and go, oh, hey, I don't like Tiffany because she builds her platform on hate. By the way, I don't know a single Tiffany that builds a platform on hate. Just gonna disclaimer. But like, I don't want to be that person that has that be what they're known for, right? But like, one of the things that also came up in your intake form that I really wanted to touch base on is that you said that you've told thousands about your rock bottom. You know, to me, that's not weakness. That takes a really strong person to be able to lead people through where they've been. So how did you know that your lowest point wasn't something to hide anymore, but somewhere to build from?
There wasn't some magic point where someone waved a wand and I'm like, I'm transcendent now. And
so much easier if
I'm
it was.
free. It's been a process. It's been a long and painful process. I've been in 12-step recovery for love addiction for 6.5 years, almost 7. And my first year of recovery, I did nothing but talk about my ex. And like I said a lot of, I was addicted to her. So I could admit that, but it took me a long time to really understand my own set of issues there. But so I was talking a lot about it, but not necessarily in healthy ways. I would like spill my entire story on somebody if they just asked a question. And so it took me a lot of moderating to like get that into something reasonable. So I was so in so much pain. I mean, heck, it was probably like 4 months into the process where all of my feelings were starting to come up, because that's what happens when you stop medicating your feelings. They come back. That's why withdrawal is so painful. And I wanted to die. I didn't have a plan, you know, but so it wasn't like in the realm of suicide prevention. I wasn't that kind of a risk, but I if I could have ceased existing, then, you know, snap my fingers, then that might have occurred. So I was in an enormous pain and I was thrashing badly. I was barely able to function. I did somehow manage to still do my job. God knows how. You know, my view of myself didn't help me there, but it took a lot of work and, you know, 7 meetings a week for a year.
Wow.
Of constantly sharing honestly. And the brilliant part about 12-step is that you're around a bunch of other people who are recovering from the same challenges you are. And so you can realize you're not alone, and you can realize that you're in a space that's safe. It's designed to be safe. It's designed to be non-judgmental. It's designed to be supportive. It's really brilliant, honestly, in my opinion. And I know that programs vary all over the place depending on the people in them, because people, right?
People.
But I learned in that environment. And then I also got to be part of a spiritual center that has helped me learn a lot about who I am in the greater scheme of things and my connection to that which is more than me. And it was years of me learning how to put this into a more palatable form. But I learned in those programs, and I now run the men's group at my church. And the way that I run that group is that I share very openly about me and my life. And one of the reasons I now do that is because me doing that without it being a pity party, it helps make the space safe for other people. And so it's been a very gradual place for me to be. But now I found that when I'm like that, when I show up that way, then people are now safe to accept themselves and or to share their own experience. And I find that so healing that it just reinforces me doing that in a healthy, moderate way. But you never stop learning this process. So there wasn't some light switch that went off where I'm like, okay, it's okay for me to share my stuff.
Right.
But it is very intentional that I do it. It's very important to me because I was so terrified that anybody would ever know the truth about me, that anybody would ever know the things I would spend 8 hours in a day barely able to work. And then I would work all night because I hadn't done the work during the day, but I was a horrible procrastinator. I was terrified anybody would ever know that. And so I would hide it. And now I'm finally, like 60 years into my life, now I can actually share when I'm struggling. I can share when I'm having trouble. I can share when I've made a mistake. And biggest triumph of all, I can share with somebody something that I felt was hurtful to them and be with them in whatever their reaction is. That has been the hardest thing for me to do.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard for me to go to somebody with something that I thought harmed them and then just be with whatever the reaction is. That's very, very painful for me. So it's an ongoing process.
That leads me to some follow-up questions. So the joining in the program, what did that teach you about connection, like that moment? And then did it change how you show up for others?
Oh, goodness. We don't have enough time for the answer to that one, but I'll try. So the process of leaning, and by the program, I assume you mean 12-step recovery program. Yes. So, because we often use program as a generic word for it. It's taught me about what safe community can be like. I hold it up as the best example I have of what psychological safety really means. And not all program meetings are like that. Not all members are like that. Everybody's at a different level of healing. But in some of the ones, like one of the programs I've been a part of is Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, ACA. On the East Coast, it's called ACOA. They have a very thick, basic book that has rules of how to run meetings. And I will say that being in that environment with other healthy people has really given me a good example of what it can be like. And once you see healthy, then why would you do anything else, right? And now that I have examples of those communities, and I have dear friends from lots of different communities of that sort, and my church, and I include a lot of the LinkedIn population in there as well. Now I just do my best to help maintain and support things that are healthy. One of the reasons that I've been a fan of Nick Power for a long time is I see him also intentionally doing that, intentionally creating a safe place for people to be in comments and share themselves and be honest. And I will do whatever I can to support that kind of safe conversation.
Absolutely.
I have a lot of reasons for that, but
I have a lot of respect for Nick, and I have to cut you off for just a second because he is going to pop up, I think, on every episode so far, because he has, besides my intro, besides the solo first episode that's like, I think 11 or 12 minutes, just kind of laying the groundwork for this. He's popped up on every single conversation.
He's everywhere.
I'm not obsessed with him. I probably live the closest to him. We're supposed to grab coffee at some point. We still have yet. I mean, he's a busy marketing guy, dad of three. I'm a busy marketing guy, dad of three. Like, who has the time? I'm desperate, I think, is probably the wrong word, but like, I would be super excited if I could get him on the show.
I would also love
to pick his brain.
I would love to have him on my podcast too. Before things went totally nuts, I did end up having one-on-one conversation with him, and I've always wanted to have another, but I'm also understanding that, you know, he's very, very busy person. Meanwhile, I've had enough conversations with him in DMs, comments, and in person to have enormous respect for him, and probably more than anything else for his humility.
Yeah, just a really good overall human.
So I like him. And so he's an example of what I think healthy looks like. And when he went super viral, one of the things I reached out to him was to check on how he was doing, because
I did the same thing.
If that had happened to me, I would be in a padded room.
Yeah, I'll leave our private conversations private where they were, but I saw a human behind the screen and was like, I know what this feels like, because when I built the Sims global community, it blew up to like 60,000 members almost overnight, and I became like this little viral celebrity amongst the Sims community, and people reaching out to me and thinking that just because I ran this group gave them the right to message me whenever about whatever. And so I just felt that, you know, him popping off, I was like, this poor guy is probably reeling right now. Let me just check on him and see how he's doing. And that's kind of how our relationship cultivated, was just in the DMs, reaching out to each other, discussing the weight of being perceived. But I do want to side note back to where we were and ask the very last question of this particular segment about you sharing your rock bottom, which is, what would you say to someone who thinks that their story disqualifies them and is holding back from doing what they want to do because of their story?
Well, I can have a lot of empathy for that, because I've been there. And you know, I've been in a shame spiral around what's happened to me, a number of the things that have happened to me, and I've had a number of things that I used to be really terrified somebody might find out, and then I would also readdress them. I think that what matters a lot more than the details of your story is where you are with it. And because if you can be at peace with what you've learned from your story, it doesn't even matter what your story was, it is of value. If you're in a place where you're like, wow, this happened to me, this is what I went through, and this is what I've gotten out of it, then you are ready to share something that will touch other people. And I would not hesitate, if you can phrase it that way. If your story is, look at how bad the world wronged me and I'm still feeling that way, yeah, maybe not the best time.
Yeah, I agree with you there. One of the things that I'm challenging myself to do, and this is not advice that I will give to everybody, obviously, but it's something that I'm doing to help myself grow as a person, is that I no longer want to write from the scar. I actually do want to write from the wound. Because I feel like that, for me at least, is more cathartic and therapeutic. And I think that, especially with the way that I write, that jarring content that we discussed earlier, that helps open that mirror for somebody else. Because while I'm still speaking from the wound, I guess my word choice is different. But that's not for everybody. If your story, you know, obviously I don't speak of my story in those kinds of posts. It's very universal, if you will. It doesn't necessarily call out one particular type of pain. It's just kind of all encompassing. But I think that's one of the things that I've been exploring with my content, with the podcast, is saying the thing that nobody says and saying the thing out loud from that place of hurt, even at times.
Well,
I think there's a difference between trauma dumping and trauma offering.
I'll keep my original comment in general about it being about context.
Yeah.
Sharing what it feels like to be in that place is important. You don't want to invalidate somebody's feelings, but also offering that there is a context in which this, there's a bigger picture there, or at least allowing for that, even if you don't say it. But if you have it within you that that there's a bigger picture here, I think that can help make that palatable. I do push back on that a little bit because I used to be the thrashing wounded person.
Yeah.
And I didn't learn anything when I was the thrashing wounded person. I just surrounded myself with other thrashing wounded people, and we would commiserate and have big, mutual pity parties. And because of how I was in my past, I tend to maybe overcompensate. Maybe a good word to underline about my life in this podcast. I tend to overcompensate and go more towards, let me try and make sure that this all has perspective, so that I don't end up, dragging myself down first,
right?
And then other people down second. Meanwhile, I'm a lot more tolerant of different expressions and experiences of life than I used to be. That's also part of the having grace for people being people. When people are hurting, they're hurting.
Hurt people.
Well, that happens too. But when
they're hurting, yeah.
And but meanwhile, there's having feelings means you're alive.
Yeah.
Flat out. That's it doesn't really mean anything other than you're alive. There's no bad feelings. There's no wrong feelings.
You don't get to enjoy the dash without the feelings.
If you don't. And meanwhile, you can choose to stay in anger and rage.
You can. Absolutely.
And I don't particularly recommend it. I also don't recommend whitewashing, Pollyanna, spiritual bypass is one of the words we use for it, and just toxic positivity. That's another word. I don't recommend that either, because then you don't actually have the feelings. You just bypass it and say everything's great,
everything's sunshine and rainbows,
everything happens for a reason, and
no, sometimes the reason is just that life sucks, it's not exactly fantastic. Nobody's handed here's the manual that the coaching offer that tells you how to fix it from the get. You've got to figure it out, and everybody's manual is different. Everybody's playing a similar game, but we're playing it on a different board, know.
And what I've come, and I went through a period where thinking everything happens for a reason helped me for a while. I no longer believe that. The belief I've now come to address for me, everybody's got their own, right? Like you said, is that everything that happens can produce something good.
Yeah.
And I have yet to find something in my life, no matter how awful, that didn't end up having something good come from it. That doesn't mean the thing was good.
Right. And it doesn't mean that the good thing that came from it happened immediately.
Oh, no, it takes time.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that the good thing was even oh, hey, I went through this traumatic event and then I ended up getting a $10,000 client. Sometimes it's, I went through this traumatic event and here I am 10 years later. I'm much more of a resilient person who no longer cares what people think about me.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a personality trait that you develop because of it.
Yeah. There's,
numerous amounts of good things that could come.
And I can literally go through, I've done an enormous amount of work, right? And so I can't expect other people to have this view of their life, but I can look at everything that's happened to my life and not only see something good that came from it, but I can when I'm in the right spot, have gratitude that that happened, because ultimately I really like my life now.
Yeah.
It's not perfect. It's not stress-free, but I wouldn't want it to be. The life I have now is a direct byproduct of all the things that have happened to me. That included being fired from my first job.
Yeah. Which I think brings me into a great segment to what you're doing now. Since you are, the engineer of life, if you will. You had mentioned, so we're going to get into, talking about what you do and the coaching industry and what coaching with integrity means in a world that's monetized me. So you mentioned feeling pressure to post about your offers, but you really want to talk about what you've lived through. So you've got like that tug of war between visibility and vulnerability. How do you navigate that as a coach without turning yourself into content?
You're presuming I'm not going to turn myself into content. Well, I'm not going to turn myself into content. Depends on what you mean by that phrase. But the thing is, and luckily I'm going through a coaching program that's phenomenally useful, powerful, and real. So I have guidance. It's not just my own suppositions. But yeah, my transition's an interesting story too. So it's like, I spent my life as an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty much an engineer before I was in junior high. I loved dissecting things and figuring out how they worked and understanding the rules behind it. And so my mind always wanted to understand. So I ended up going into the world of problem solving. Like, I loved word problems and math, what most people assume hell looks like. For me, word problems, some people think that's actually what hell is. And in my case, that was just fun. I had a book of recreational mathematics when I was in junior high, and I had fun with that. So that was natural to be an engineer. As far as the world of life coaching and the transition that I made there, it's an interesting world. I ended up getting into it because I just wanted to help people. That came through my recovery process. It's a fairly common actual process people go through when they've healed themselves. They then want to help other people that have suffered, and I happen to fall into that camp. The population that I've wanted to work with has changed and evolved a bit. It started off with other people who have suffered from life the way I had, and now I'm to the point where I want to help people that have big dreams to realize them, kind of like my dream right now is doing what I'm doing now. And
Yeah.
I ended up retiring early at the age of 59 because the dream wouldn't shut up. It was a calling, and it just kept getting louder in my head. And I had gotten to the point where I'd saved enough money to survive without working. And I'm like, okay, this is the stars are aligning. It's time to make this move. But because I don't technically have to work, I could take my time, and I could put it off as long as I needed to. And so I've been slow in my process of developing this business. The actual business, Engineering Your Life, has existed licensed in the state of Arizona for a year now.
Yeah. Well, one of the best pieces of advice that one of my early mentors had provided is that slow is steady, and fast can burn you out.
It can.
And so it is easier and better for some people. Obviously everybody works at their own pace, but like if engineering your life in a slower, more logical pace makes sense to you, I think that's grounded in the wisdom of what you do. Which, by the way, I love the phrase engineering your life because it sounds super logical, but it's like what you offer is so deeply emotional as well. Like your offer is one of the ones that I'm like, this is it. So what does it actually mean to help somebody design their life? Like, how do you balance the structure and everything?
Well, well, I will say that a lot of what anyone needs shows up organically as we look at what's going on. But I also, because I have an interesting ADHD brain that loves to draw patterns, and I have a huge background of engineering and product development and also arts in my past. I see where they overlap without forcing it. So in terms of, your life, first of all, you look at, well, what is it you want?
Yeah.
What is it? What is your objective? And again, the population I'm leaning towards now is people that have like a dream, something. Maybe they want to retire. Maybe they want a new set of responsibilities. Maybe they want a new level of work. Maybe like me, they did a lot of engineering work and now they want to like go help people.
Right.
Or maybe they want a new relationship or whatever. Maybe they want to like have a whole lot more free time and they want to like live off grid. It doesn't really matter what the dream is, but in the cases where it's like my case, that dream may not align with the practical ladder steps that you take to climb the corporate ladder. It may not be that logical step. It will be a break. And so it involves a bit of a leap of faith.
Yeah.
But first you need to know what it is. And sometimes people have the feeling there is a need, but they don't know what it actually is. And then there's some processes. Ultimately, even though there's a lot of engineering in my background, my business is based on deep, proven spiritual wisdom, and also has a lot of methodology from Jungian psychology. So I'm an interesting blend of different modalities, but ultimately, what you want to do, what your soul wants to do, what your highest self wants to do, is trying to speak. And so the first thing you do is listen to it, and that takes practice. There's processes, meditation. I've learned a meditation practice that now, after years of doing it, lets me be attuned to the wisdom that's coming to me. And I also, journaling's a good one. There's a lot of different processes that you can use to kind of get that out. So first, know what your objective is, and then look at, okay, so why aren't you doing it?
Right.
The very obvious question, but it's an obvious question without an obvious answer, because often people will come up with the excuses. I'm too busy. I've got responsibilities. It costs money and I have these expenses, but often those are just reasons to not look at it too hard.
Yeah.
They're like getting you off the hook. If it's really calling to you powerfully, and the work I'm doing now called to me, then it helps to have a coach type personality that can help you ask the right questions. I have half a dozen coaches. I've been being coached for quite a while. So I'm very familiar with, I've had therapists. I've had a trainer that does deep work. I have a yoga teacher that also takes me into some deep practices. I have a spiritual mentor. I have an army of people supporting me. And so I go to sessions with these people and they ask really good questions.
Yeah.
And then I explore, and it's not some obvious process, but it is a process. And then ultimately, if you really want to take the move, first you verify it and say, what will it feel like if you're there? So there are visualization techniques that can help. So clarity. And then after that, then you start moving, and then you're inevitably going to run into some obstacle, some resistance, something in your way. Well, that's where the real work is. The real work is, now that you're moving in this direction, let's face what this obstacle is and take a look at it. What is it really? What does it represent? Maybe it's got something from your past that it resembles. It usually does. We're very colored by the first 10 years of our lives. And so there may be some healing. If it's really, really painful, maybe you need some therapy. But in the realm of coaching, we really help people focus on using their own internal resources, their inner wisdom, which is powerful as all heck, to help provide the answers. And the great thing about doing the work I now do is that I get to facilitate that process. And if people are willing to do the work, it's amazing what becomes possible. And the word I use that I, as my guide for me and my clients, because I'm like client zero, I'm like patient zero. So freedom.
Yeah.
What I do is I help people free themselves. And when you are free, you can be creative. I have a real powerful calling around innovation. It's what I did in the corporate world. I was a champion of innovation processes, which kind of could fill an entire podcast itself. But
I'm sure.
So I love being able to help people get out of their own way, because I believe people are inherently creative, inherently powerful, and have the answers if you can just help them unblock themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. What's one thing that you think people misunderstand about coaching or the coaching industry?
I didn't know what a coach was 3 years ago. I had people that supported me in roles that were like that. I was even doing coaching, but I didn't really know what a coach was. I was more used to mentoring, or therapists, or the traditional spiritual leaders who would like tell you things, provide you knowledge, like reading a book or going to a seminar. That's what I kind of thought a lot of the world of self-help was. I did not know that you could be trained well to basically ask the questions that lets people access their inner resources. So I think there's a lot of people that think that a coach is somebody who gives them some process.
Right.
Here's the form to follow so that you will be organized and never miss another meeting. Or
here's
get
the 12
all your
step
to-do list.
framework. Here's the swipe files.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's just one. That's more like that's mentor coaching.
One
that's
part.
Yeah. But the one thing I didn't know, and I think a lot of other people know, is that there are powerful tools that can help you learn how to support yourself, and that some of the best coaches I know are very strategic. And that it takes a lot of work to be able to be in that place for someone.
Got to be very intentional.
Yeah, it has to be very intentional, and it sometimes shows up as being very quiet. Holding space for somebody is a thing.
Active listening is a thing.
It is. And it takes, especially for those of us that are used to helping other people, it can be really tempting to help other people through my own advice. I've done that actually a lot. But that's not the only way to help people. Sometimes it's a mix. It's a mix. I do mentoring too. I love working with young engineers, for example, and sharing what a career in the field has shown me, things that I wished I had known when I was in my 20s and 30s. I really love helping people in that stage of their career. But sometimes the real question is, let me do a visualization with you where you, for example, imagine, and people's imaginations are powerful, really, really powerful. And you then connect to a powerful well of information that Carl Jung called the collective unconscious, which is beyond you. And it takes some study to realize what that's really about. But when you get somebody connected to that, so I can run through a visualization. One of my favorites is that you're going along on a path and you encounter a wall.
Okay.
And this is the path to your dreams. This is the path, what's out there, where you're going. And as you're going down this path, you would come across this wall. And then you ask them to kind of explore the wall and take a look at it. What's it made out of? How high is it? And then you say, okay, you have access to any tool you want. Any tools you want that you will possibly need to do what you want to do with this wall. And then they go find their tools, and then they go, dig at it or blow it up or whatever.
It's a wrecking ball. Yeah.
And then imagine what's going on the other side. And all of that, it's amazing that people have very little trouble coming up with what that looks like. And then you have a conversation around what it actually means to them, because it's all symbolic.
Right.
The wall represents the obstacles in your path, or at least what you imagine them to be. Because it turns out, here's the big answer to all of it, is that all of the obstacles are really in our own mind.
Yeah, we're standing in our own way.
We think that they are all those other external things. We think that it is the circumstances or the responsibilities or the whatever, but it turns out that it's all just it's imaginary, real, but it's in your head. And so then when your mind is able to look at those symbols, and maybe you blow a hole in the wall, and then the next time you go back, that hole's like been healed up. So you get to explore what these things mean in your life and what they actually do. And when you do that, you end up with not only what can you do about it, but you end up with access to core things about what's causing it. And you end up able to heal it and resolve it in a much more powerful way than if somebody says, well, just use this form and follow this process and force your way through it. We call that white knuckling in recovery. And it turns out that when you go deep, and visualizations and dream work is part of how somebody does that, you can get access to really powerful stuff that resonates and feels right to the person. And do not ever discount what feeling right means
to that person. Yeah.
You end up with a huge sense of, I can do this. And the thing is, there is no end to the obstacles. There will always be resistance. As I grow and as as my business blossoms, I'm now finding new ones. And so that's the work I do with my coaches is you can't see yourself nearly as well as you can see someone else.
Correct.
You ever able to say that? It's like, I know your problem, right? I can see it so clearly. Why can't you see it? Well, that's just real.
Yeah.
And that's why coaches exist, is because we can help people face their stuff more honestly than they can do on their own. And meanwhile, we then empower them to keep doing the work that is really their work to do anyway. It's a wonderful thing to be able to support that.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people really understand that that's what's possible with coaching and how much it's worth. Holy crap. I cannot put a figure on what I've gotten in my life through having the coaching support. It's priceless.
Impact does not have a price tag, which leads me to my next question. Coaching industry, social media, the space of influencing. What does not selling out look like to you in a world that rewards performance?
I'm going to skip past trying to define what selling out looks like. I think it's what it means to be a real human, being authentic, being honest about who you are. And that includes authenticity about yourself and your challenges without like putting it all on display, but be a human being. Be honest about who you're trying to help. And one of the byproducts of this that I think is wonderful is that when you're really authentic and owning your stuff, you can, without any reservation, support other people that may be competitors of yours. Because, coaches match people by what feels right. And the people that really would benefit from my work are going to find me, and it's not most people. And as somebody that would resonate with your work or with the other coaches that are out there, and there's some amazing coaches out there on LinkedIn. That's what actually got me into LinkedIn, was connecting to the coaching community. There's some really amazing human beings out there. So not selling out. I think that if you stick with your mission, which is to help people, and then you're honest about that and you do your best to do that, then the temptation to sell out doesn't show up. I think it's when you get like desperate for results, when you get hung up on numbers and metrics, or if you get too attached to what your success is going to look like, then it's really tempting. And so if you can notice when those dragons come up in the video game of life, and just respectfully say, no, thank you, which takes a lot of courage. Then just keep doing your thing and have faith that if you are you the right people will find you, and the people that don't belong with you will recognize that, and they'll save you a lot of trouble, and they'll just go someplace else and then accept that. It ultimately ends up being a big surrender game.
Yeah. I think this leads beautifully into the next section, which is about the community that we crave, but we don't know how to ask for, or we don't want to be so open asking about it. One of the things that you had mentioned in your intake form was that you told me that you crave more vulnerable coffee chats, those heart-to-hearts without the filters, without the sales pitches. Why do you think that kind of conversation feels so rare in these digital spaces?
Well, I don't know that I'd say it feels rare to me, because I seek that out now. But I think that if we are not okay with being vulnerable, we're not going to find that kind of conversation. If we are not willing to be seen, but we want other people to be vulnerable, it's not going to work very well. I'm actually not finding it to be that rare, but I've made that my way of life. So I think people need it, and they may not know that. Honestly, the media of this planet tends to tell us that we need to perform and be different and be beautiful or liked or strong or have a washboard stomach or have all this success. And it's all bullshit, honestly. And so that's what keeps us from realizing that what really matters in life is to be okay with yourself, and to have genuine connection. And genuine connection means vulnerable connection. It means open. It means like sharing your whole humanity. I didn't discover this until the last 4 years or so. But once I've discovered it, holy crap, I will not take anything else now. I don't have shallow relationships.
Yeah. When I say rare, I mean in the digital space as a whole. Obviously not your experience or mine. We talk a lot about curating your own feed, and that's the type of feed that we curate, is something that is very, I guess you could say, sacred even, how close the community is. But do you think that community as a whole has become a buzzword?
Well, in a way, it's easy to abuse a good idea. One of the things that I used to get really upset about was when, a leadership body would take a book, a good book, and they would take 2 pages out of that book and then make an entire program.
Bastardize it.
Yeah. And they would just they say, this is the thing. It's like, no. There's way more to it than that.
This is going to fix you.
Yeah. And so I think that there's a lot of performative, quick fix ideology out there, as if that's actually the answer, and do whatever it takes to get the numbers. I think is an unfortunate part of publicly traded companies.
Yeah.
Because I blame stockholders, honestly. I blame people that will trade your stock if you didn't perform this month for most of the world's ills. That's a bit extreme, but I think that this quick fix, immediate gratification society tends to make us want to be, I want to feel good now. The Amazons of the world are not helping.
Nobody wants to do the hard work. I think as humans, we are just inherently lazy. Like you said earlier, there's that excuse of I don't have the time, I don't have the money. But one of the other things is, and I learned this being a part of the coaching industry early on, as not even a coach or a mentor. I was just kind of like a peer support person when I first started in the coaching industry. I was just kind of like the poster child that engaged with all of the students within the communities that I ran. And I noticed that even purchasing a program does not necessarily mean they're gonna do the work.
Oh, heck no.
You know, and not,
No,
you
no.
know,
In fact, this
I
entire
came
industry
across, there's people that I worked with that, like, I'd be like, oh, well, there's Susan and she's still on section 1. And,
yeah,
you know, bless Susan's heart. No, Susan's not a real person. We're just naming names for
yeah, of course.
purposes. But like, there's people that buy the program because they think that just spending the money fixes their problem.
Well,
And
this entire
that's enough for them. And then sometimes it's not enough for them, but they don't do the work. The workbook's too long, the questions are too hard. The intake forms. Here's a good example. It popped up on another episode talking to one of the girls. I got like 20 intake forms that I sent out because I had a huge influx of people that were like, I really want to be on the podcast. Actually, some people I still haven't sent one out to yet because I sent out like a first batch. That first batch was 20 people. I got back about half of them, maybe.
Yeah.
And because people are busy, but also because some of the feedback that I've gotten from some people that finished it, some people that haven't, the questions were very hard.
They were
The questions weren't meant to be easy. They were meant to be challenging because I wanted to dive deep into your psyche, if you will, to really guide a good episode.
Oh, and I think they were brilliant.
People don't want to do the work is the point.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, it's like there's entire industries built on that model. Just look at the gym membership.
6-minute abs.
They count on you
Not
signing up for this budget gym membership, and then never on the fact that you won't keep going,
and then never canceling. Yeah.
Well, they in fact, if you did keep going, they wouldn't be able to fit all the people in there. So that's part of the model. So yeah, there's people that will leverage the human tendency to not want, I mean, there's also the weekend seminar that will save your life.
Mm-hmm. I call that pain for profit.
Yeah. And so I think that some of that's baked into us as humans. Some of it is trauma response.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't want to feel the pain. So we'll drink or watch TV or play video games or whatever.
Anything to get your mind off of it.
Whatever, that's why there's so many 12-step programs. The thing is that there's industries that will play on that. I mean, for God's sakes, just look at all of Madison Avenue and what they do. They're completely playing on our need for whatever quick now. And so there's a lot of the world that's actually geared to reinforce that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it takes, in my case, it took me bottoming out to be willing to do the real work. I had seen a therapist for 10 years at that point who knew I needed to be in recovery, who tried to get me to go to meetings, but it took me going through my third divorce and wanting to die before I finally was willing to do it. So in my case, I woke up.
Face it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but now that I'm doing that, I still like the easy way out. I will still, spend an evening watching YouTube videos if I'm not careful.
Yeah.
It takes real discipline, which comes from willingness, which comes from surrender, to be able to actually do the real work. And it's not for everybody. Not everybody's going to have this sense of peace, but I will say that it has been insanely rewarding to me to be that way. And people don't have to suffer the way I did.
Right.
Not everybody, you don't have to go through that much pain. And so now part of my mission, what I want to do in life, is to help other people to have a much more peaceful, workable life, that can actually be the stuff that they dream of, and help point the way. So, if you find yourself somebody who's been there,
mm-hmm.
and listen
to
them. So yeah, it's an interesting challenge about how we find ourselves in these boats,
Absolutely. One of the other things that you said that you want to explore was being weird. And I think that's kind of just code for being real.
I like to use authentic.
Just being real. This is authentic. I'm multifaceted. I'm a person. What it means to be a human in today's society, I guess. How do you stay connected to yourself when the world keeps trying to polish all of our edges, right? Like,
well, the world just gives us the idea that we need to be polished and then we do the work. The world's not actually trying to do that. I have a lot of things I do to stay grounded.
mhm.
You know, my recovery community is part of that. My spiritual community is part of that. Weird LinkedIn is part of that for me. You know,
Yeah.
it's so, you know, I have intentionally built my world to support me living an authentic life that's healthy. The close friends I have are that way. If you're not going to be open and authentic, if you're going to be performative and show offy, you're just not going to be very close to me, and you will just kind of gradually drift away. And so now I don't have to look very far at all to find reinforcement, inspiration, or support. A couple of years ago, I broke 3 ribs. I flew over the handles of a mountain bike, and I could barely move. And I sent to my closer network, I need some support. And I had people over at my house every day helping me out. My men's group that I facilitate actually had a meeting in my house because I couldn't drive and I couldn't move. And you know, it turns out when you show up for others,
They'll show up for you.
they will largely show up for you. And now I'm living in that life. And one of the reasons that I smile so much, one of the reasons that I find joy in pretty much every day is because that's now my world.
Yeah.
And you start with it. I guess it's the oft quoted, be the change you want to see in the world. That's how to do it. First, be who you are and what you want to see. And then if over time, the world will meet you. And I believe that's been, you know, your experience. Now, if you have very large numbers of people, then you're going to have to really pay attention to the statistics and not get hung up in the outliers.
Yeah.
You know, because people are still going to be people.
People are people.
But I gotta believe that the community that I know that loves you, and I know a lot of people that do, it's because you show up. It's because you're honest. It's because you own your shit. It's because you write really open, vulnerable, biting posts to yourself. And you know, and in some cases that may be a little bit too much truth for somebody to handle, in which case then they're going to reshuffle.
It's a filtering system.
They're placed in your orbit, and you know, and then it just works. It's funny. I've known, you know, one of the expressions that I got early in my program was because I had a problem even with the word God. The expression was hard for me to listen to, but rejection is God's protection. Have you ever heard that?
I've not.
It's brilliant.
I've not. I grew up in the South, and I did grow up in a conservative household. We were raised Catholic, and I used to hear, you know, God only gives you what you can handle. And geez, I mean, Robert, I think I was like 12 when I was like, well, I should be able to bench press a fucking Buick by this point. And, you know, I don't like to really talk about those types of topics because of the fact that living your life online, you know, opens you up to so many different opinions. And so I don't down anybody for their viewpoints on religion or politics or what have you. But I try to keep mine to myself because that's where it belongs, within your own individual self, you know.
And I don't try to teach anybody what they ought to believe.
At the end of the day, I think the good book just translates to don't be an asshole. And so as long as you're not an asshole, I think you're fine.
Well, that expression, regardless, was an interesting way to say that, is that when somebody self-selects their way out of your orbit, they're doing you a favor.
Yeah. Everything is meant not to be, you know, the everything happens for a reason kind of person. You know, you know, call back to that. But yeah, I feel like people come into your life. Some are for a reason and some are for a season.
Yeah. And the best thing we can do is let them be with what their choices are.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then try not to be like reactive or overreactive to the way the world shows up. But But so I used to, if somebody was a friend of mine or a spouse of mine or whatever, I would be like just destroyed if they didn't want to be around me.
Mm-hmm.
But if they are like, no, this isn't working for me, the best possible thing for me to do is say, well, bless you, have a good life.
I wish you well.
Yeah. Well,
And
it
I
took me
think
a lot of healing to be able to take that attitude. But now I can start to see that, especially when you have enough experience, if the statistics will tell the truth, that when I'm me full out,
mm-hmm.
the people that like that will be able to see it, they will find me, and they will come close. The people that see that where it doesn't resonate, great, they see that. The whole idea of performing to be in a relationship or with a company, for that matter, we could get into the whole the job search world. You know, and I can sympathize when you like need a job, but it used to be the conventional wisdom was tell them what they wanted to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And tailor your resume to look good to them, and to basically go through so many contorted gymnastics to try to be what, you know, and that was the dating. That used to be the dating advice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that nothing could be worse.
Nothing's further from the truth.
Yeah. So yeah, the ultimate thing is like, you know, be you. The world that likes that will find you much more easily. The world that doesn't align with that will filter themselves out, and life will just work out fine.
Yeah.
When we're not attached to outcomes, life tends to work itself out pretty well eventually.
Well, I think that brings us to the final portion, which is our lightning round. So these can be, I don't want you to think too deeply about them. It's not meant to be long-winded. It can be something that we did talk about, or it could be something that we didn't talk about. No right or wrong answers. What is a hill that you will die
on? Be kind.
What's a cringe moment that you now see as a milestone?
Well, I see a lot of them. When I got fired, when I had an incomplete in one of my last classes in university, and my last divorce were all really hard, but they all helped me.
Hey, what is a truth that you live by even when it's hard?
Be honest.
If your life had a soundtrack, what's the song that's playing during your biggest pivot?
Oh, Lord. Could be I Will Survive, Gloria Gaynor.
Fantastic choice. If somebody joins your world, what can they expect to feel?
Appreciated.
I love that. All right, that brings us to the plug your shit portion of our podcast, because of course, Robert, you didn't come and talk to me for all this time to not tell people where they can find you. Of course, your podcast, your coaching program, the places where community is real and belonging isn't just a buzzword for you. So go ahead and tell us where we can find you, where we can connect with you and learn more about who you are and what you offer.
Great. Well, first of all, the biggest place where I'm present is my LinkedIn account. I do have a blog. It is linked on my homepage for LinkedIn, and we can do that. That blog actually is the current link to all of my stuff. I have a YouTube channel. I have that my podcast is on, and you're one of them.
Yeah.
Which was wonderful. And I will have a website in the next couple of weeks. I have a domain registered, engineeringyourlife.net.
Mm-hmm.
It's .net. And that will go live, and it will become the place where you can find all my stuff, and it will become the one-stop shopping for everything. But at this time of recording, my LinkedIn channel is home.
Absolutely. And all of that will, of course, be linked into the description for any of the listeners that want to go and check out Robert. So, of course, that was Robert Haines, a man who coaches like a poet, posts like a philosopher, and builds communities that feel like a warm soup for the soul. His story does remind me that you don't have to scream to be heard. You just have to speak with intention and let the right people lean in. Join us next week on Things My Friends Say We Shouldn't Be Doing, when we talk to someone else who's probably breaking every social media rule in favor of something real. Unless I accidentally log off the grid or become a houseplant or start a commune for people who delete their posts 5 times before publishing, in which case, buy my merch. Until then, feel your feelings and post like someone who already knows that they belong. Love your faces.